God designed sex to be a journey of discovery over a lifetime. As our trust and understanding of each other grow, and as we deal with any difficulties we come up against, so the enjoyment and pleasure we experience in our sexual relationship can get better and better.
We both had sexual relationships before we met each other. And so when we first married, we found that those things were indeed an issue to us. It had been said to me before we married that after marriage, sex is all downhill. And I'd started to believe that and taken some of that on board. So in the first few years of our marriage, those issues really did become a challenge to us. Things have happened for us in our marriage since then that have really meant that our sex life in our marriage has completely taken off. And I have to say that it's far better than I could ever have imagined that it would be.
Being able to laugh together is important because we won't always get it right. And if it's not going right, it's not a disaster. Laughing, talking about it and growing in our understanding of each other will bring change.
We want to say a couple of things at this point to those of you who've decided to keep sex until you're married. Right from the beginning, and particularly on your wedding night, don't expect too much of each other.
The expectations for sex on your first night when you get married are just many and bizarre, I think.
There's lots of stereotypes, I think.
Yes, and you see all these films and you have all these, imaginations about it. But, of course, in reality, you're completely exhausted. Both of you are. And so, actually, it's nothing like that. But it was still a very positive experience.
Yeah, it was still nice, and we were, I think, through being sensitive to each other, both being in that position, that it was good, but it's continued to get a lot better since. As we get to know each other personally, that's what's helping the sexual side of our relationship.
We'd suggest you talk together about your expectations before you get married. Talk about any fears or concerns you may have, because it will help you to avoid possible tensions and disappointments.
What we mean by that is, don't expect to become black belts at sex overnight. Don't expect to be able to turn on fantastic sex at the flick of a switch.
If it's not easy at the beginning, and not at all what it looks like on the films, don't despair. You are not alone. One couple we know completely failed to have sex at all on their honeymoon. They sought help, and now they have a great sex life.
Whether you've been sleeping together or not, while we're on the subject of honeymoons, our suggestion is this: plan as relaxing a honeymoon as possible. Weddings are usually emotionally and physically exhausting.
If you've already booked your honeymoon, please feel free to ignore what I'm about to say. Going up the Amazon in a canoe or crossing Antarctica are not ideal. Those sorts of holidays are not necessarily conducive to good sex. One man on a previous course had in fact planned a 2-week honeymoon going up the Amazon on a boat and had kept it secret from his fiancée. He looked horrified when we said that bit about a relaxing honeymoon, and much to his wife's relief when she found out, managed to change the second week to a hotel by a beach.
Another trend in our culture today is to compartmentalise sex, to isolate it from the rest of the relationship. But our sexual intimacy affects every other part of our marriage relationship, and every other part of our marriage affects our sexual intimacy.
Discussing and working out our sex life has become a lot easier over the years, but when we first got married, it was just a mechanical process and really very boring in some ways, because it was just a physical act. But as time's gone on, we've been able to discuss and understand what each other needs. And as we've got more, especially since we've become older, that we've been able to discuss and be able to understand that we're making love together and not just having sex. It's become far more satisfying and much more team building, much more whole effort of working together.
Sex is not just the icing on the cake of a marriage. It's a vital ingredient of the cake itself. That's God's plan. The first secret is to see it as a journey.
The second secret to building a good sexual relationship is be ready to talk.
One of the reasons for needing to talk is that our sexual responses are likely to be very different.
It's no accident that it takes a woman longer to respond sexually than a man. If women were like men, it would probably all be over in 30 seconds flat, which would be very boring indeed. God designed us differently for good reason.
Understanding each other's wiring is what it's all about. And we're not going to do that in a night or a week or even a year. That's why we need to keep talking.
We recognise that talking about sex can be difficult at first. Our sexuality is rightly a deeply private part of our lives, and talking about it requires us to make ourselves vulnerable. But we can't afford to leave it to guesswork. The more we tell one another what we enjoy or don't enjoy, what turns us on and what turns us off, the more natural it'll become.
One of the most important things for keeping our sexual relationship active and healthy is really to talk about it, and not at the time and kind of getting into sort of long conversations about it, but you know, taking the odd moment, you know, out during kind of, you know, one evening and just bring it up as a topic and
talk about how it's going, how we're feeling, what we think. And it's really difficult to do that, actually, even though, you know, you'd think you could be really open with your partner, but actually it can be incredibly hard to talk about these things. But the value of doing that is enormous, because it just gets better.
And I think it's a very unnatural thing to do in one respect, because it doesn't come up in everyday conversation. It's just something which you know is part of our life and which we do, and we all have our own thoughts, and it's fascinating to hear and talk about what the other person's feeling and thinking.
Yeah, because it's not what you expect.
If our sexual relationship is to develop, we must be open with each other. The second secret is be ready to talk.
The third secret is be prepared to tackle problems. Most couples come up against problems in their sexual relationship at some point or another. That's normal.
For some, these problems will be the result of sexual trauma from the past, such as abuse or rape, or a past abusive sexual relationship. These sorts of things can't be brushed under the carpet. They will almost certainly affect your lovemaking if they're not faced and talked about together. You may also need professional help, and if that's the case, please don't hesitate to ask your course leader for advice.
For others, there are more common problems that can usually be worked through as a couple. As we address problems together, it so often helps us to grow closer. We want to mention some common problems that most couples will encounter at some time or another.
The first is low self-esteem and a poor body image. Good sex has so much to do with our state of mind. Low self-esteem works against our natural arousal instincts. All of us, men and women, are bombarded with the body-perfect image. It's so easy, even if we're not doing it consciously, to compare ourselves and our husband or wife to the supermodels and film stars. And hardly anyone comes out of that feeling great.
One of the most wonderful benefits of marriage is its potential to heal. A person's self-esteem can be built up through the love and encouragement of their husband or wife.
Telling someone, you're beautiful, or you look great, or whatever words you would most naturally use, on a regular basis will make that person feel good from the inside out. And that will definitely impact our sexual relationship for the good.
Another common problem is tiredness. Our sex life is so often the first casualty of tiredness, especially a few years into marriage, maybe when children come along or when our jobs are at their most pressurised.
We need to put aside time for making love, just as we encouraged you to put aside time to have date nights and to have fun together. Be creative in your lovemaking. Don't always leave it to last thing at night. Make an effort for the sake of your partner and your marriage.
Another problem can be different levels of sexual desire.
We have had to resolve sexual differences.
Yeah, he wants too much.
I want too much, and I don't think it's too much. I just want a natural amount, but maybe slightly more than Annie does. So we've worked out that really the best thing to do is talk about it, because then the issue just goes away, doesn't it?
Yeah, you understand each other better. Definitely.
Love in marriage might mean one of us holding back at times for the sake of our partner. For the other, it might mean a conscious decision to give ourselves to being aroused.
Most sexual problems experienced in marriage are common and solvable. Things like premature ejaculation, difficulty in achieving orgasm, or differences in levels of desire. Our advice, if you experience these things, is don't bury them. Do talk about them together. And reading a book about sex together may help you to start talking. And we've put some suggested titles in the back of your manual.
And just remember, Problems don't equal failure. Don't let this be an area that you don't address if you hit a problem, and do please ask for help if you need to.
The fourth secret is to deal with past sexual relationships. For some couples, past relationships can cause jealousy and mistrust between them.
Recognise if this is the case for either or both of you. Our advice is to be as honest with each other as you can, to face the past together and to talk about it before you get married.
I'd had past sexual relationships, and I found that that was quite important for me to really have dealt with that emotionally before, you know, and to have got over those before and sorting that out before we got married. So it's something that we'd worked through I'd worked through separately, and also in marriage preparation it was something that we'd covered and discussed a little bit.
And it was important for me to know it was in the past for you. Yeah.
As you talk about the past, you don't need to go into all the details, as that could arouse feelings of jealousy unnecessarily. But it really is best to go into marriage with no skeletons in the cupboard. You might well need to say sorry if a past relationship is causing your fiancé to feel hurt, and then forgive each other.
We've already talked about forgiveness being something we must choose to do, whether we feel like it or not, and to keep doing so each time the pain or the jealousy resurfaces.
You might also want to say sorry to God, where you know you've got it wrong in the past and you feel guilty. Ask for his forgiveness, and then dare to believe you're free from guilt and shame, to move into marriage as a fresh start.
I think we both felt sad, actually, that he and I weren't our first relationship.
Yeah.
And so we felt sad that we hadn't saved ourselves for each other. And we also felt that we'd brought quite a bit of baggage from our past sexual relationships. So we actually really did do a lot of talking through.
A lot of sadness, a lot of regrets. You know, I think that was it, a lot of hurt. You know, both of us had been hurt in relationships, and it hurt other people.
And I think we'd made some bad choices.
Yeah, made some very bad choices.
And I think we felt, actually not until we became Christians did we really understand the impact of sexuality within a relationship. And so when we understood that, we saw that we did have a lot of previous relationships where we didn't feel that we'd really honoured the people that we'd been in relationship with, or we hadn't been honoured. But we were able to talk. We were really able to talk about all of those things. I mean, neither of us felt we couldn't talk about those things. And obviously we can't say we never had the past that we had, but we were able to sort of start again and say, okay, well, we had that past, we're sorry for the things that we've done, and now we're going to start again together.
If it seems too difficult for you to talk together about past relationships, but you know you need to, your course leaders will be very willing to help.
We need to bring closure to past relationships. That may well involve practical steps, such as getting rid of boxes of old love letters, possibly throwing away diaries describing feelings from a previous relationship, or maybe destroying photos, as these can arouse old and unhelpful emotions.
You need to assure each other that you feel very differently about your marriage to any previous relationship.
Our friendship group had more than one of Richard's ex-girlfriends in it, and he, because everybody's very civilised and friendly, and you know, people are lovely, Rich didn't understand how difficult that was for me, and I don't think anybody realised the negative impact that was having on our marriage for quite some time, actually.
I think as far as I was concerned, I had made a decision that I wasn't going to marry the girlfriends that I'd had in the past, and that I was going to marry Poof. So I didn't see the problem until a few years in, and then of course it hit me plain as day one day that for Poof it must have been hell.
It's so much better to start marriage with a foundation of trust and openness between us. The fourth secret is to deal with past sexual relationships.
The fifth secret is to discuss family planning and having children.
Children will change the shape of your relationship.
Many couples have benefited from having some time as a couple establishing their marriage relationship first before trying to have children.
With regard to family planning, be sure that you've had a proper discussion about it and are fully informed about the implications of different methods.
The final secret of building a good sexual relationship is this: don't believe everything you hear. There are statistics everywhere as to what is normal frequency for lovemaking. Ignore them. You are totally unique as a couple. Work out together what's good for you both. And it's worth remembering that over the whole course of your marriage, your physical relationship will change.
As far as the physical side of marriage goes, obviously things change. Quantity and quality are both different as you get a bit older, but that doesn't mean that you stop the physical side of things. And I think now when we get bad backs and so on, we've learned that nothing better for a bad back than to be rubbed by somebody who you love. And this sort of side of things is a way of saying I love you too.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think that one realizes when you're young, the physical side of marriage is very important. It doesn't become less important as you get older, it becomes different, and the quality changes, and it is important because it's communication. But I think the other thing one learns is that sometimes one is tired and not interested, and another time it's the other way around. And there is a lot of give and take, always, and that will go on because we don't stop being physical beings as we get older.
And remember, sex is not just the icing on the cake, but a vital part of building a strong marriage over a lifetime. Our advice to you would be, invest in it.
We suggest you spend 10 minutes now talking together about what seems most relevant for you from this session in order to build a good sexual relationship.
Well, it's time to introduce our guest couple. So we're very pleased to be joined by Saya and Jules, who've been married 11 years.
Well, welcome, Sarah and Jules. Thanks so much for coming along. One of the things we've talked about on this session is our love languages. Have those been helpful for you?
Yeah, I think realising that you give love in a way that you like to receive it often, and that's not necessarily what the other couple wants, the other person wants.
And for you, Sarah, what's most important for you?
Acts of service. So I would tend to do things for him, thinking that's what he wants, but that's not what he wants at all.
Yeah.
So.
And for Jules, what about you? What's most important?
For me, it's touch really, and just affection and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we've learned to sort of to understand one another's different love languages and to accommodate. So, you know, when we wake up in the morning, getting Sarah a cup of tea is probably the best thing I could possibly do, which I've learned.
He gets jealous if I stroke the cats too much.
And does it take time to sort of work out how to put these into practice, would you say?
A long time. I have to say that after 11 years of marriage, I've only really actually realised, well, I mean, I knew that he loved affection, so he would smother me with affection, which actually made me give him less. And realise that if he wants affection, that if he actually draws back, I suddenly notice it's missing and give him more. So it's been a whole learning experience.
And has that connected to your sexual relationship in the years you've been married?
Always the person.
Who's going first?
I was going to answer that one. In terms of the sexual relationship and the love language, I don't think that sort of come strongly into play there, but I think that just understanding one another has been really important. And you know, for us, one of the things that we've learned is that, you know, the world makes sex a big thing, but actually what you've got to remember to do is just get on with it, have fun, realise that it's not always going to be perfect, you know, but you can always have fun. And I think that's made a big difference because so often it's just a big deal to so many people.
Yeah. Now, we said earlier that most couples come up against problems at one time or another. Has that been the case for you, and are there things that you've had to work through?
Yes, quite major actually for me personally, well, both of us, because it takes two to tango, obviously. And we were married young. You know, we were the first we never had sex until we got married, and it was always very painful for me. And you can easily accept a bad quality sex life, you know, and become complacent. And I just have persisted, and it took 5 years to get a proper diagnosis. So I had to go from people saying it's psychological, knowing that it wasn't. So it was hard work, but I just would say that keep on going and don't give up, and keep on working at it. Don't expect it just to happen, and you actually need to be very proactive to sort things out sometimes. So.
And that problems can be solved and moved through, and that you can grow together.
That's right, and you have to believe in it. You can't. He used to get very frustrated and say, but there is an issue, and we need to sort it out, and you need to find a solution. And you can get lazy.
Yes.
So you have to watch that.
I want to ask you one final question. If you had one bit of advice that you could pass on to all these engaged couples here, what would it be?
I think for me to always prioritise your relationship above all other relationships, because if you're right, everything else is right. And that can be quite difficult because life becomes very busy, family demands, etc. And just making time aside for each other and making that the most important always, I think, would be the big thing.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah?
Jules and Sarah, thank you so much for coming to join us.
Our Bible readings for this session come from the Song of Songs and Psalm 85.
Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot wash it away. If one were to give all the wealth of his house for love, it would be utterly scorned. Love and faithfulness meet together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs forth from the earth, and righteousness looks down from heaven. The Lord will indeed give what is good, and our land will yield its harvest. Righteousness goes before him and prepares the way for his steps.
I'm going to say a short prayer as we close. Thank you, Lord, for the wonderful gift of sexual intimacy. We ask you to teach us how to use this gift to express and to receive love. And we pray that in each marriage and each future marriage represented here, love and faithfulness would meet together. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, we hope that you've had helpful discussions during this session. Next session, we'll be looking at shared goals and values. Until then, goodbye.